My hands trembled as I tore open the envelope that changed everything. Divorce papers. The word stared back at me from the top of the first page, cold and final. I sank into the couch, my breath catching in my throat as I read through the terms Marcus had laid out. He was taking the house. The savings. Even my grandmother's antique furniture that had been in my family for generations. At the bottom of the second page, scrawled in his confident handwriting, was a note: "The law is on my side, Frankie. You should have paid more attention." My vision blurred with tears, but then something else caught my eye. Tucked into the fold of the papers was a small flash drive, silver and unmarked. My heart hammered against my ribs. What was this? I pulled it free, turning it over in my shaking fingers. Marcus was always meticulous about documentation, always recording business calls for his consulting work. But why would he send this to me? Unless he wanted to prove something. Or unless he made a terrible mistake. I sat on the living room floor, laptop balanced on my knees, and plugged in the flash drive. The folder opened to reveal dozens of audio files, each labeled with dates spanning the last 2 years. My stomach twisted. I clicked the first one, dated 18 months ago. Marcus's voice filled the room, confident and casual. "She has no idea I've been moving money. My lawyer says as long as I document it as business expenses, she can't touch it." Another voice responded, one I didn't recognize. "Smart man. My ex tried to fight me too, but I buried her in paperwork." My breath stopped. I clicked another file. This one was more recent, just 3 months ago. Marcus again, laughing with someone. "Frankie's too trusting. She signs whatever I put in front of her. By the time she realizes what's happening, I'll have everything locked down." Rage and disbelief crashed over me like a wave. Every private conversation, every lie, every calculated move against me was right here, recorded in his own voice. He had been planning this for years. I pressed pause and stared at the ceiling, forcing myself to breathe. My name is Frankie Tate. I'm 34 years old, a graphic designer who worked from home while Marcus built his consulting empire. I had always believed in us, in our partnership, in the life we were building together. But clearly, I was the only one who believed. I wasn't wealthy. I didn't come from power or connections. But I was smart, resourceful, and methodical when I needed to be. And right now, I needed to be all of those things. Marcus thought he had cornered me, thought I would fold under the pressure of his legal maneuvering. He had no idea what I was capable of when pushed into a corner. I stood up, smoothed my shirt, and made myself a cup of coffee. Calm. Logical. Effective. That's how I would approach this. I opened my notebook and started writing. Every recording would be catalogued. Every lie would be documented. Every person who helped him would be identified. This wasn't over. It was just beginning. As I continued through the files, a sickening realization hit me. It wasn't just Marcus. The recordings revealed conversations with my brother, Alex, who had been offering Marcus advice on how to handle me during the divorce. "Just keep her emotional," Alex's voice said on one recording. "She'll make mistakes when she's upset." My own brother. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. There were more. My parents, celebrating what they called Marcus's well-deserved legal victory in a conversation he'd recorded at their house last month. My mother's voice, tinged with satisfaction, said, "Frankie was always too soft. She needs to learn how the real world works." My father agreed, adding that Marcus was finally teaching me a lesson about business. I sat in stunned silence. My family, the people who were supposed to protect me, had been cheering for my destruction. The betrayal cut deeper than anything Marcus had done. At least with him, I could understand the motivation, greed, ambition, selfishness. But my family? They were supposed to love me unconditionally. Instead, they had chosen sides, and it wasn't mine. I spent the next 2 days organizing everything. I created a spreadsheet documenting each recording by date, participants, and key revelations. Some files showed Marcus discussing hidden accounts with his business partner. Others revealed conversations where he coached my brother on what to say to me to keep me off balance. One particularly damaging recording captured Marcus admitting to his lawyer that he'd been transferring marital assets into offshore accounts for over a year. "She'll never find them," he said with a laugh. "And even if she does, I've got documentation that makes it look legitimate." I printed transcripts of the most crucial recordings, highlighting the illegal activity and the conspiracy against me. I made backup copies of everything, storing them in 3 different locations. A network of manipulation had been carefully constructed around me, designed to leave me powerless and defeated. But now I could see every thread, every connection, every weak point. Knowledge was power, and I suddenly had more power than Marcus could possibly imagine. The question was how to use it most effectively. That weekend, my parents hosted their monthly family dinner. I almost didn't go, but then I realized it was the perfect opportunity. I needed to see them all together, to watch how they interacted, to identify who else might be part of Marcus's schemes. I arrived with a smile, carrying the apple pie I always made for these gatherings. My mother greeted me with a hug that felt hollow now that I knew the truth. "How are you holding up, dear?" she asked, her voice dripping with false concern. "I'm managing," I replied calmly, watching her expression. She seemed almost disappointed by my composure. At dinner, I listened more than I spoke. My brother mentioned seeing Marcus at the gym, carefully avoiding my eyes. My father made a comment about how important it was to be practical during difficult times. Every word, every gesture, told me more about their allegiances. I asked casual questions, gently probing for information. Who had they talked to recently? What did they think about the divorce proceedings? Their answers gave me exactly what I needed, a clear picture of how deep the betrayal ran. Monday morning, I called Natalie Brooks, a lawyer my college roommate had recommended years ago. Natalie had a reputation for being brilliant, tenacious, and absolutely ruthless when necessary. I didn't cry when I met her. I didn't plead. I walked into her office with my laptop, my flash drive, and my meticulously organized documentation. "I need your help," I said, placing everything on her desk. "But first, you need to hear these recordings." For the next 3 hours, Natalie listened, her expression growing harder with each file. She took notes, asked pointed questions, and occasionally shook her head in disbelief. When we finished, she looked at me with something like respect. "Frankie, this is extraordinary evidence. Your husband has essentially documented his own fraud, manipulation, and conspiracy. If we play this right, we can not only protect your assets but potentially pursue criminal charges." My hands were steady as I signed her retainer agreement. "I want to do this carefully," I told her. "Strategically. I want every move to count." Natalie smiled, a sharp, predatory expression. "Then we're going to work very well together." Marcus grew bolder as the weeks passed. He attended a charity event where several mutual friends were present, and according to 3 different people who texted me afterward, he spent the evening holding court about his divorce victory. "The law is completely on my side," he reportedly said, drink in hand, surrounded by admirers. "I've documented everything perfectly. Frankie doesn't stand a chance." He even joked about how I was probably crying myself to sleep every night, lost without his guidance. The messages from friends ranged from sympathetic to concerned to quietly angry on my behalf. I saved every screenshot, every forwarded conversation, every piece of evidence of his arrogance. When 2 friends suggested they confront him, I politely asked them not to. "Let him talk," I wrote back. "Let him feel confident." The truth was, his overconfidence was a gift. Every public statement he made, every boast about his legal superiority, would make the eventual fall that much more devastating. I smiled as I added the screenshots to my growing file. Marcus was building his own trap, brick by arrogant brick, and he had no idea. My first small victory came unexpectedly. I had been monitoring our joint accounts closely, something Marcus apparently didn't think I was capable of. When I noticed a pending transfer of $15,000 to an account I didn't recognize, I immediately called the bank. I explained that I hadn't authorized the transfer and needed it stopped pending a review. The bank representative was helpful, especially when I mentioned ongoing divorce proceedings. The transfer was frozen. Within an hour, my phone exploded with angry texts from Marcus. "What did you do? That transfer was legal. You have no right to interfere." I didn't respond immediately. I let him stew, let his anger build. Finally, I sent a simple reply, just protecting my interests. "See you in court." His response was a string of threats and accusations, all of which I screenshotted and forwarded to Natalie. "Perfect," she wrote back. "He's showing a pattern of intimidation. Keep records of everything." That night, I allowed myself a small glass of wine and a genuine smile. It was a minor victory, but it proved something important. I wasn't helpless. I could fight back. And I was just getting started. The unexpected ally came from the most unlikely source. My cousin Emma, who was 10 years younger than me and who I'd always thought was too wrapped up in her own life to notice family dynamics, called me late one night. "Frankie, I need to tell you something," she said, her voice urgent. "I've been watching what's happening with your divorce, and I need you to know that I saw through Marcus months ago." She explained that at a family gathering last Christmas, she'd overheard Marcus on the phone discussing his divorce strategy with someone. At the time, Emma hadn't thought much of it, but as the months passed and she watched him position himself as the victim, she started paying closer attention. "He's been manipulating everyone," she told me. "Uncle Harold, Aunt Victoria, even Alex. He tells them one thing, then turns around and does something completely different. And they believe him because he's so smooth." We talked for 2 hours, and Emma agreed to document everything she observed. She had access to family gatherings I might not be invited to anymore, could listen to conversations I'd never hear. Together, we formed a quiet but powerful partnership. Marcus's network was starting to crack. 2 weeks later, Marcus made his most public move yet. He gave an interview to a local business magazine about maintaining professionalism during personal challenges. The article, which I read online with a mixture of fury and satisfaction, painted him as the reasonable party in our divorce. "Some people can't handle the complexities of legal proceedings," he was quoted as saying. "My soon-to-be ex-wife is struggling to understand that emotions can't override the law. I've been patient, but there comes a time when you have to move forward, with or without someone's blessing." The comments section filled with supportive messages praising his maturity and composure. A few people who knew us both posted sympathetic comments about how hard it must be to deal with an emotional ex-wife. I didn't respond. I didn't write angry comments or try to defend myself. I simply saved the article, printed 3 copies, and added them to my file. Every public statement he made, every attempt to humiliate me, was building a narrative that would collapse spectacularly when the truth came out. My silence wasn't weakness. It was strategy. And Marcus was too blind with arrogance to see the difference. The crucial piece of leverage came from one of the middle recordings, one I'd almost overlooked initially. Marcus was talking to someone named Troy, apparently a business associate, about a deal they'd structured. "I know the tax implications aren't exactly legal," Marcus said with a laugh, "but if we structure it right, no one will notice. And even if they do, I'll claim I didn't understand the regulations." Troy's voice responded, "You're playing with fire, man. That's fraud if they can prove intent." Marcus's reply was chilling. "They can't prove intent if I destroy the records. And frankly, by the time anyone notices, I'll have my divorce settlement secured and the money moved offshore. Frankie won't see a penny, and neither will the IRS." I played the recording 3 times, making sure I understood exactly what I was hearing. This wasn't just marital betrayal. This was documented evidence of tax fraud, potentially criminal activity that could land Marcus in serious legal trouble. I immediately sent the recording to Natalie with a detailed explanation. Her response came within 20 minutes, "This changes everything. We're not just fighting a divorce anymore. We have leverage that could destroy him." Marcus's next move was predictable. He tried to provoke me into a public confrontation, probably hoping I would say something he could use against me in court. We ran into each other at a coffee shop downtown, not coincidentally, I suspected. He approached my table with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Frankie," he said, sitting down uninvited. "We need to talk about being reasonable. This whole thing has gotten out of hand." I looked at him calmly, took a sip of my coffee, and said nothing. He continued, "I'm willing to be generous. You can keep your grandmother's furniture, and I'll give you a small percentage of the savings. But you need to stop fighting me on everything else. It's embarrassing for both of us." His words were meant to wound, to make me feel small and defeated. Instead, I smiled gently. "I appreciate your concern, Marcus. I really do. My lawyer will be in touch with your lawyer about the settlement terms." His face darkened. "Your lawyer can't change the law, Frankie." I stood, gathering my things. "We'll see," I said quietly. As I walked away, I felt his anger burning behind me. Every calm response, every refusal to engage emotionally, was eroding his confidence. He wanted me to break, to give him the drama he needed to justify his narrative. I refused to give him that satisfaction. The shift within my family began subtly. Emma had been working quietly, planting seeds of doubt in strategic conversations. She mentioned to my mother that she'd noticed inconsistencies in Marcus's stories about the divorce. She asked my father casual questions about the legal process that made him start questioning Marcus's explanations. When my brother mentioned Marcus's gym comments, Emma said, "That's interesting." I heard him say something completely different to Uncle Harold. The cracks started showing at the next family dinner. My mother pulled me aside and asked, with a hint of uncertainty in her voice, "Is everything Marcus told us actually true, dear?" I didn't attack or accuse. I simply said, "Mom, I think you should ask yourself why Marcus has been so eager to tell you his version of events. What does he gain from having you on his side?" She didn't respond, but I could see the doubt taking root. My father was more resistant, but even he started asking Marcus more pointed questions about the legal proceedings. The united front Marcus had carefully constructed was beginning to crumble. People were starting to notice that his stories didn't always align, that he was perhaps not the innocent victim he claimed to be. Natalie arranged a meeting with my Uncle Thomas, my father's younger brother who had always been the black sheep of the family for asking uncomfortable questions and refusing to blindly follow family consensus. Thomas had been watching the divorce proceedings with growing skepticism, particularly after Emma shared some observations with him. In Natalie's office, with everything properly documented and recorded with his permission, Thomas provided testimony that would prove crucial. He explained how Marcus had approached him 6 months before filing for divorce, asking questions about asset protection and offshore accounts. He specifically wanted to know how to move money without his wife finding out, Thomas said, his voice heavy with regret. I told him it sounded unethical, potentially illegal. He laughed it off, said he was just planning ahead. Thomas also testified that Marcus had admitted, during a golf outing, that he'd been setting Frankie up for failure for years, systematically undermining her confidence and making her dependent on him for financial decisions. The testimony was recorded, transcribed, and added to our growing mountain of evidence. My uncle's face was pained as he spoke. "I should have told you sooner, Frankie. I'm sorry." The financial breakthrough came from an unexpected source. While reviewing our tax returns from the past 5 years, I noticed something strange. Marcus had always insisted on handling our taxes, claiming his accounting background made him better suited for it. But now, looking at the documents with fresh eyes and Natalie's expertise, we spotted irregularities. Deductions that didn't make sense. Business expenses that were clearly personal. And most importantly, income that appeared on our joint returns but never showed up in our joint accounts. Natalie brought in a forensic accountant, a sharp woman named Patricia who specialized in uncovering hidden assets. Patricia spent 3 weeks digging through every financial document we could provide. Her report was damning. Marcus had been skimming money from our joint accounts for years, hiding it in a complex web of business accounts, investments, and offshore holdings. The total amount was over $400,000, money that should have been marital property but that he'd systematically stolen. "This is beyond unethical," Patricia told us. "This is criminal financial fraud. He was stealing from you while making you believe you were broke." The evidence was airtight, documented, and devastating. I maintained my public composure even as everything was falling into place behind the scenes. I went to the gym, had coffee with friends, posted occasional cheerful updates on social media about my design work. People who saw me commented on how well I seemed to be handling the divorce, how mature and dignified I was being. What they didn't know was that every smile, every calm interaction, every appearance of moving on peacefully was strategic. I was demonstrating to anyone who might testify or observe that I was the stable, reasonable party. Meanwhile, Marcus was becoming increasingly erratic. According to mutual friends, he was drinking more, his temper was shorter, and he was making wild accusations about me to anyone who would listen. The contrast couldn't have been more stark, the calm, composed wife versus the increasingly unhinged husband. Natalie was pleased. "You're building a clear psychological profile," she explained. "The court will see a woman who maintained her dignity and a man who became progressively more aggressive and unstable. It matters." Every interaction, every public appearance, every calm response to his provocations was another piece of evidence that I was the victim, not the villain. The turning point came when I decided to apply pressure. Through Natalie, I sent Marcus's lawyer a carefully worded letter. We didn't reveal everything we knew, just enough to make them nervous. We mentioned that we had evidence of financial impropriety and potential fraud. We indicated that we were prepared to involve federal authorities if necessary. We suggested that Marcus might want to reconsider his aggressive stance and negotiate a fair settlement. The response came within 48 hours, panicked and defensive. Marcus's lawyer claimed all financial moves were legitimate business decisions. He demanded to know what evidence we supposedly had. He threatened countersuits and legal action for harassment. Natalie smiled when she read the response. "He's scared," she said. "They wouldn't be this defensive if they weren't worried." I took the next step myself. I sent Marcus a single text message: "Your secrets aren't as safe as you think. We should talk before this gets worse for you." His response was explosive, a string of threatening messages about how I had nothing, how I was bluffing, how he would destroy me in court. I forwarded everything to Natalie. "Perfect," she said. "Keep him off balance. Keep him making mistakes." Natalie filed our formal response to Marcus's divorce petition, and it was nothing like what he expected. Instead of a simple counteroffer, we submitted a comprehensive document outlining every instance of financial misconduct, every hidden asset, every fraudulent transfer. We attached evidence, transcripts, and sworn testimony from Uncle Thomas. We didn't include the recordings yet, that was our nuclear option, but we included enough to make it clear we had substantial proof of his schemes. We also filed a motion to freeze all marital assets pending a full financial investigation. The court granted our motion. Within hours, Marcus's access to the accounts he'd been so confident about was completely restricted. His business accounts were frozen. His personal accounts were frozen. Everything was locked down pending the investigation. According to Emma, who heard it from my mother, Marcus lost his mind when he found out. He called everyone he knew, trying to figure out how I had gotten so much evidence, how I had managed to turn the tables so completely. His lawyer, realizing the depth of the problem, apparently suggested Marcus consider settling. Marcus refused, still believing he could win. The social fallout happened faster than I expected. Once word got out that the court had frozen Marcus's accounts pending a fraud investigation, people started asking questions. His business partners began distancing themselves, concerned about their own liability. The charity organizations where he'd been so proudly holding court suddenly became less interested in his donations and involvement. Friends who had supported him, either out of genuine belief or social convenience, started quietly backing away. Some reached out to me, apologizing for not seeing through him sooner. Others simply disappeared from both of our lives, unwilling to be associated with the scandal. Emma kept me updated on the family dynamics. My parents, finally confronting the evidence they could no longer ignore, were horrified. My mother cried, apologizing over the phone for not believing me, for supporting Marcus without question. My father was angry, mostly at himself for being manipulated. Even my brother Alex called, his voice heavy with shame, admitting that Marcus had played him. The network of support Marcus had so carefully built was collapsing around him, leaving him isolated and vulnerable. Marcus made one final attempt to regain control. He filed an emergency motion claiming I was destroying his business reputation with false accusations. His lawyer argued that the frozen accounts were causing irreparable harm to his consulting practice. He demanded the court immediately lift the freeze and sanction me for malicious prosecution. It was a desperate move, and we were ready for it. Natalie filed a response that was surgical in its precision. We documented every accusation with evidence. We showed the court that Marcus's business was suffering because his clients were discovering his fraudulent practices, not because of anything I had done. We provided additional evidence of his attempts to hide assets and intimidate witnesses. The hearing on his emergency motion was brief. The judge, a no-nonsense woman in her 60s, reviewed our evidence and Marcus's motion with growing disapproval. She denied his request entirely, and added that if he filed any more frivolous motions, she would consider sanctions against him. Marcus left the courtroom pale and shaken. I left with Natalie, who squeezed my shoulder. He's out of moves, she said. Now we finish this. The final court date arrived 3 months after I first opened that envelope. Marcus came with his lawyer, both of them looking resigned and desperate. His earlier confidence had completely evaporated, replaced by the haunted expression of someone who knew exactly how badly they'd miscalculated. My family sat behind me, united now in their support. Emma gave my hand a squeeze as we waited for the judge. The preliminary proceedings took about an hour, both sides presenting their positions. Marcus's lawyer tried one last gambit, arguing that much of our evidence was circumstantial, that Marcus had simply been aggressive in protecting his assets, which was his legal right. He suggested that a compromise settlement would be best for everyone. Then Natalie stood. Your Honor, with the court's permission, I'd like to present audio evidence that will clarify the defendant's intentions and actions beyond any doubt. She held up a small portable speaker. Marcus's face went white. His lawyer looked confused, clearly not knowing what was coming. The judge nodded. Permission granted. Natalie pressed play. Marcus's voice filled the courtroom, clear and damning. She has no idea I've been moving money. My lawyer says as long as I document it as business expenses, she can't touch it. The recording played for 3 minutes, capturing his admission of deliberate fraud. Natalie paused it, provided context and documentation, then played another. Frankie's too trusting. She signs whatever I put in front of her. Another pause, another explanation, another recording. I know the tax implications aren't exactly legal, but if we structure it right, no one will notice. The courtroom was absolutely silent except for Marcus's recorded voice, so confident, so pleased with himself, explaining in detail how he'd betrayed me, stolen from me, and planned to leave me with nothing. After the 4th recording, Marcus's lawyer stood. Your Honor, we need a recess. But the judge waved him down. Sit down, counselor. I want to hear all of this. Natalie played 7 recordings total, each one more damning than the last. Marcus sat frozen, his face ashen, unable to look at anyone. When the final recording ended, the silence stretched for a long moment. The judge spoke, her voice cold with anger. In 30 years on the bench, I have rarely seen such a clear case of premeditated fraud and manipulation. She turned to Marcus. Mr. Tate, your actions constitute not only civil fraud but potentially criminal activity. I am ordering that all marital assets be returned to joint status immediately, with Mrs. Frankie Tate as the primary controller pending final division. Furthermore, I am awarding Mrs. Tate 70% of all marital property, including assets you attempted to hide, as compensation for your fraudulent conduct. Marcus's lawyer tried to object, but the judge silenced him with a look. I'm also referring this case to the district attorney's office for potential criminal prosecution. You may face charges of tax fraud, financial fraud, and conspiracy. The courtroom erupted in whispers. Behind me, I heard my mother crying quietly. The judge continued, the divorce is granted on Mrs. Tate's terms. Mr. Marcus Tate, you are ordered to pay all court costs and attorney fees. This court is adjourned. Natalie squeezed my hand as we stood. You did it, she whispered. You actually did it. I walked out of the courthouse into bright sunshine, feeling lighter than I had in years. My family surrounded me, my mother still crying but now with relief and pride. Emma hugged me tightly. You were amazing, she whispered. Marcus left through a side entrance, his lawyer already on the phone, probably calling other attorneys to handle his criminal defense. The news spread quickly. By that evening, multiple friends had texted congratulations. The business magazine that had published Marcus's interview issued a retraction and an apology. 2 of his former business partners publicly announced they were ending their association with him. Within a week, I had my life back, not the life I'd shared with Marcus, but a new one built on truth, strength, and dignity. I hired 2 new clients for my design business. I had dinner with my family, the real conversations we should have been having all along. And late at night, in my quiet house that was truly mine now, I opened my journal and wrote, my name is Frankie Tate. I survived betrayal through intelligence and patience. And now, finally, I'm free. The revenge was complete, not through cruelty, but through truth. And that made it so much sweeter.